Welcome to Lex's World. Let's talk mutations. I wanted to give you guys a sample of what's out there and we can all ooh and ah together. Most mutated plants are cut down by growers before they go anywhere, so you rarely get to see them. Some of these are inherited mutations and some of these are caused by stress. A few of them are extremely useful and others are totally useless and maybe even detrimental to your plants. For those of you who've watched my breeding episode, you'll understand that all mutations are just phenotypes of cannabis, some of which are rare, weird one-offs, and some have stabilized and become dominant in certain cannabis or within a particular region. First, let's start with some weird anomalies that aren't really useful for anything, but really are fun, like 3 cotyledons, or a triplant with 3 true leaves. Now here's a mutant fan leaf where one of the leaf fingers is shrunken. Here it is from the back and front. Here's an odd one of too many petioles shooting off the stem. That one I've seen before. And here's something that can only be described as wrinkly leaf syndrome. It's not some kind of deficiency, it's actually how the plant grows in. Usually these aren't very useful for harvesting. Continuing the freak show, here's a split fan leaf. And speaking of splits, here's some plants that did their own topping, all by themselves with no scissors, which is pretty useful in my opinion, but makes the grow a bit more unpredictable. Now we have fan leaves that are growing little buds on the actual fan leaf, which is really cool looking. And finally, ending the freak show of minor anomalies are poly-embryonic seeds, meaning seeds that happen to have 2 taproots. They usually sprout into 2 separate plants out of 1 seed. Now here's a couple of oddities that have to do with whitening. The first one is albino cannabis, which is a true genetic mutation, much like in lots of other species. Albino plants obviously struggle with absorbing the correct colors of light, hence they don't grow very well and often die from disease. More often, cannabis will experience this mutation only partially, like this. The second phenomenon is called bleaching, and that's when the top of the cola turns hard and bright white. This is not a desirable reaction, because even though it looks cool, the tops of the colas are like this because they've been degraded by heat stress. This is common in grows where the plants got too close to a very high output light near the end of the growing cycle. This beauty is called a polyploid plant. It's like cannabis gigantism, and it does create a crazy large cola. Trouble is, in terms of happening naturally, this phenomenon is really rare. There's a way to force this mutation more often, but it involves adding a very questionable chemical to your plants, and I don't endorse doing it, and most growers don't either, since yields are so high nowadays anyway. So this rarity will thankfully remain a rarity. Finally, let's close with some traits that are less of a one-off mutation and more of their own strains, with some breeders dabbling in stable genetics of these. The most obvious such trait is purple coloring, which is still not completely stable, but many breeders have managed to at least make it a dominant phenotype in certain strains. See my purple weed episode for more info, link to it in the description. Another trait of this kind is stringy cannabis, which grows its buds all along the branch rather than in clusters. Really cool, but kinda cumbersome to harvest and doesn't produce as much THC. And this is duck's foot. Yep, duck's foot cannabis that has webbed fan leaves and in years past has been used for its stealth capabilities. You wouldn't really think that this is a cannabis plant from a distance, would ya? And this fascinating species is Australian bastard cannabis, or ABC, which is so interesting I'm thinking of doing a dedicated episode on it in the future, but the gist is that while it doesn't produce great THC, it sure looks amazing and might have some useful unique traits that can be bred, like resistance to certain climates. And finally, this is creeper or creeping cannabis, a common and nearly stabilized phenotype in strains like Trainwreck. This mutation involves more horizontal branches and long, sweeping colas that burst in all directions, instead of in the typical Christmas tree upward pattern. Actually very useful, especially in outdoor settings like the one you see here. And there you have it. That's the mutant collection. I think I've covered a lot of them. If there's something I haven't covered here, be sure to leave a comment down below, because I love hearing about these. Otherwise, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button. See you guys next time.